Hello and welcome to the 42 Rugby Weekly. Gavin Casey here in Cork, and I'm joined as always by Murray Kinsella of the 42. Murray, how are things?
Yeah, good. I think I'm doing better with this lockdown than the ones before, to be honest. Maybe I'm getting a bit too used to it, but before we came on there, we were talking about the luck of us not having kids yet, so we don't have to contend with that. But all's well. How are you getting on?
I'm concerned. This is the first time I've seen my own face in a number of days. Got the shout from Murray a few minutes before coming on that we were going to be recording video for the first time, and I was not aware of the extent to which I resemble a caveman. But there you go. That's lockdown 3.0.
You look good.
If the listeners and viewers can't handle me at my worst, they don't deserve me at my best. Bert, you are a man with children. How is that going for you? Is it a homeschooling sort of situation? What ages are they and how are they getting on?
Yeah, I'm very lucky. My daughter's 14, my son's 12, so they're pretty much self-sufficient. They're both down in different parts of the house, both on calls with their schools at the moment, or at least they're supposed to be. But yeah, I think I feel sorry for people with younger kids, who get a load of homework on a Monday or work for the week and have to go through it subject by subject with them. Whereas, as I said, the age mine are at, the teachers have been brilliant, so they're effectively getting an hour of class, an hour of work, an hour of class, an hour of work, and it's going okay. I feel sorry for them. Like, it's obviously tough not to be able to see their friends and things like that, but in terms of we're much more fortunate than a lot of people.
I think for a lot of rugby fans, what's pulling them through this week and probably has been pulling them through this month really of January is the prospect of Munster and Leinster this weekend. And we were talking about it last week. I kind of mentioned just my own personal feelings towards it, which were like, it feels like nearly a bigger game than some of the semi-finals and actual more meaningful games technically over the last couple of years. And the build-up has probably closer resembled like a Champions Cup knockout game. It feels, even your own coverage of it, Murray, from early in the week, or maybe it's more so how I'm consuming it or how I'm perceiving it, because I'm just excited. Like I need it in my life, frankly. And we're going to obviously get into that match for the majority of the show, but and we're going to chat as well a little bit about projected Ireland squads towards the end of the show as well, albeit we haven't seen that Munster-Leinster game, so a lot of those kind of predicted squads will probably differ in a couple of days' time, or maybe not. But one thing we probably don't do enough, Birch, is actually ask you just about games you played, and you would have played in so many of these clashes between Munster and Leinster, particularly in that game. The changing of the guard in 2009 obviously sticks out, but what are your memories of it? Like, even from your own playing era, like the intensity of the rivalry, or maybe lack thereof. Like, what was the kind of dynamic between you guys and the Munster players, and how ferocious did it get?
Yeah, I think I had a few good run-ins with them when I was in Connacht as well. We, even though obviously it wouldn't have been as high profile, we had a 3-3 draw in Athlone one day in horrendous weather, and a 3-0 defeat in the sports ground. And there was a lot of obviously with those kind of nature, those two games were very pack orientated, and there was a lot of friction. And that Munster pack between 2000 to 2009-10 were pretty lippy, very abrasive, very physical. So you knew all about it. And I think then I went to Leinster in 2005, and obviously Leinster's my home province, and we were behind the sucking the hind tit really for 3 or 4 years, and it was pretty embarrassing as a pack, because that's where they used to take us on, and obviously the level of profile or intensity around those games was a different level, and we really struggled to hold our own. And I was just reminiscing about someone during the week there, and I remember, and this is an embarrassing story on my part, but it's credit to Paul O'Connell actually. So we played Munster in Thomond Park in 2006, December 2006, the old Thomond Park, and I remember I got stuck on the wrong side of a ruck accidentally on purpose, in a dangerous area of the field, and where they were looking for quick ball. And in those days, actually, the referee didn't really just ping it straight away. The opposition pack handed out the medicine, so I was basically getting a rain shoe of boots, and I looked at who the pack was: Bucciarello, Frankie Sheen, John Hayes, Donegal Callahan, Paulie, Leamy, Wallace, and John O'Sullivan, who had played with in Connacht, and I was trapped. I literally couldn't get out of there. And at first, there was no danger to me or whatever. It was just literally, I was going to have a lot of stud marks on my body, but I was stuck. I just felt these 16 feet going up and down on me or whatever. And O'Connell just said, like in a noise, there was 14,000 people there. It was close to touchline. That's enough, lads. And it just stopped. It stopped, and they actually walked over me. And the ball was there for Stringer, and like, okay, you say fair enough, O'Connell, but it was actually demoralising. It was actually demoralising that he had to have pity on me. I was getting such a shoeing on the ground, and so effectively, yeah, it's just first. I toured South Africa in '99 with O'Connell with the Irish colleges, and I always got on well with him in camp and things like that. But yeah, that was just a memory for me. But so. I think the big thing for us as a forward pack was to make sure we had one of them on the ground after that. Not one of us was caught on the wrong side. And I think we went to we went to Thomond or Musgrave in 2008 on a real dirty, wet night, and we beat them. And it was started that whole transition in Leinster where Mike Brewer and Noxie started to have, conflict around what kind of team we were, whether we were forward based or backs based, and there was a little bit of a changing to the guard. And that game, I think it was just, and every game pretty much when Mike Brewer got his way was, look at, the backs will have the ball when the pack have kind of found a way into the game and laid down a marker. And even though that was only 4 points in a Magnus League game, 2008, being able to go to Musgrave for us, go toe to toe with them, and not take a backward step physically, I felt was a key moment in 2009 then in Croke Park where everyone remembers. But you kind of have to have building blocks to get there. And while, and Munster were never as good in the Magners as they were in Europe, and they often had little blips. But for us, we felt that was a day that we got a little bit of confidence and maybe a little respect from them. And that led to 2009, which is obviously a huge day, and there's been some phenomenal games since. Not as many as we would have liked because it's rare we see two full strength teams go, and I think that's why there's so much more excitement about this weekend than potentially some of the games we've watched over the last 3 or 4 years.
2009 was the turning point in this whole thing, and sorry, Gav, if you look at it since 2009. Leinster have won 21 of the 28 fixtures between the teams since then. It's been real dominance, and that's not good for the rivalry, that lack of balance in it. I think Johan van Graan's record is 1 win in 8 tries, and that was the game where James Lowe got sent off for taking out Andrew Conway in the air. So Leinster have had that massive dominance, and it was so fascinating that it did flip so severely in 2009 with such a blowout win in the end, O'Driscoll coasting away on that intercept. But before that, you had that dominant Munster pack. And it's really interesting, Byrne, that you're talking about that side of it, because traditionally we would have seen Leinster as this really talented backline team, flowing skills, some brilliant tries. Even if you think of that 2001 Celtic League final where they actually did beat Munster, it was close enough. I think it was 24-20 potentially. Nathan Spooner kicking loads of goals. Yeah. Even there was some lovely tries. Darcy and Horgan, I think, both scored. But they just couldn't get the nudge on up front in the rivalry. And in fairness, the Munster pack was essentially much of the Ireland pack, really, wasn't it, at that time? What was the build-up like in 2009? So what were the things you were talking about, or the people you put a target on, or the massive kind of rocks that you had in your plan to beat them and then beat them so dominantly with that plan?
So it was actually nearly the perfect storm, and it kind of mirrored what happened on Black Sunday in Lansdowne Road. Do you remember when the other Munster-Leinster Heineken Cup semi-final, where we'd been to Toulouse in the quarter-final, scored a try from our own 22, played great rugby, and we were a team built around this flamboyant, attractive brand of rugby. And, we went into that game in 2006 full of confidence. Obviously, we'd won a Celtic Cup final against them, as you mentioned before, with Nathan Spooner, etc. And they absolutely ripped us apart. True, physical dominance, breakdown dominance, area bombardment. And when they'd soften us up, they scored some good tries. And I suppose if you think down to 2009, we'd gone to Harlequins, we'd been in a dogfight, Bloodgate, we'd won 6-5. Maybe we're lucky. Munster the same weekend, absolutely demoralised the Ospreys and playing brilliant rugby. So Munster had actually thrown off the shackles. So the game plan that won them Heineken Cups in 2006, 2008, was very effective in Cup rugby, particularly given the personnel they had. And they actually started to evolve. And that actually opened opportunity for us, because we went the other way. We went from being a team with ambition to being a team who wanted to make it a scrap. And that's what we did. And I know we scored a try, Darcy's try in the corner, and from a great strike play. But that was something that we'd been showing a different picture for 4 or 5 weeks beforehand. I think it was, I'm not sure if it's Maffey or Tupucky we wanted to get to jump out of the line. I think Earls played the centre, and we've been hoping that we would get, I think, Maffey to jump and open up that space for the pass that obviously led to line break, and then obviously we finished. And then, Drico's try at the end, but it came from it was an intercept, you know what I mean? So apart from that, we just got on top of them at the breakdown. Our set piece was good, and we just made it a kind of a battle, and they probably weren't expecting it, and that's, it's hard to see that coming, because they had such dominance over us beforehand, and because they were playing so well. But that's why I'm looking at this weekend, and I'm thinking, how can Munster beat Leinster? Well, I think they have to kind of copy that game plan or battle plan around doing what they do really well and frustrating Leinster and taking Leinster out of their rhythm, because you'll see some of the stats on Leinster's attack. It's phenomenal. So for Munster, even though their attack is making strides, for them to go out and out-attack Leinster, I think there'll only be one winner. And there's no shame in that. There's lots of different ways to win a game. But Munster's defence, I thought, against Connacht for 75 minutes was probably as impressive a defensive display as I've seen in the Pro 14 this year. And looking at what Connacht did to Leinster the week before, and getting amongst them at the breakdown, hassling and harrying them, I think that's the way forward. And Munster fans were critical after the semi-final in the Viva, where they kicked 25 times and didn't really fire a shot. But I don't think their criticism was around the fact that it was a kick chase type game. It was around how well they implemented and how physical they were, and how much energy they brought. So I don't think they're going to go far away from that, even though their game has evolved, certainly. And it won't be as one-dimensional, but I think that is the way to beat Leinster.
Just to focus on that kind of era that you were playing in, and tried to apply it to now, like as a kind of a mirror image, if you like. So when you go back to that game in which you were getting a shoeing and you felt demoralised and emasculated, and how you guys went from, say, those low enough ebbs against Munster to beating them in 2008 in Musgrave, and then applying that sort of to that game in 2009 on a bigger stage. Like, as a pack, even specifically, whatever about the full team, you would have probably taken some beatings in those sort of earlier years of your Leinster career. How does a pack go about actually improving itself and even gaining the confidence to achieve parity against a pack like Munster's back then, which was completely dominant against you? Like, was it through sort of technical training? Was it just a kind of a form thing built up in confidence over time? Because obviously now you have a situation in which Munster tend to get dominated by Leinster in the pack, and they're looking to probably do what you guys did in 2008.
Yeah, look, we had to change completely how we spoke to each other, how we held each other to account, how we trained. As I said, there was an element of game management and for example, and it sounds so stupid, but like, if your first 5 lineouts on your lineout menu were off the top, or strike plays or plays to get the backs into it, suddenly you can find yourself running away from the battle, which the primary start of a pack contest is the scrum and line-out, because it gives you a chance to go after them, whether that's from a line-out maul or whether it's from a scrum and a secondary push, and which psychologically gets you into the game, And we used to, as I said, we were there to basically give the ball to the backs, give the ball to the backs, give the ball to the backs, and Brewer insisted that wasn't the case, that we had opportunities early in the game to go after the opposition, and you mightn't get dominance that first time, and then we had to go after him again, and he wouldn't let us away with it until we did get dominance. And to get that ability, to improve that ability, it started how we trained, and like I would say 2005, 2006, 2007, our training sessions were good. It was skill focused. There was lots of quality because we had a phenomenal squad, but there wasn't an edge there. And I think 2008, 2009, there was a real edge there, and like an edge. And I'm not saying you have to have fights at training, but it has to be at a level of intensity to prepare you for the game. And two key guys who were actually brilliant for us, who don't get the credit, were probably Trev Hogan and Stephen Keogh, who came from Munster. And, they had been in an environment where they didn't get to play a huge amount for Munster. They played lots for Munster, sorry, but they maybe weren't in the Heineken Cup team in Munster. But they knew their role, the weeks of Heineken Cup games, or massive inter-pro games, was to put it up to the starting team. And there's lots of stories about a guy called Brian Hickey, who's still coaching with Cork Con, getting in the minds of that second string, like chaotic, not chaotic, but highly intense mauling sessions in Munster trainings with no referee, right? Or Brian Hickey as the referee, which the fellas coming to the side, very frustrating. It's so easy. It's so much easier to be negative than positive if you're in the second string, but yet that negativity and illegality can actually help the first team be prepared for things that they will face in the game or get better. So we used to have mauling sessions on a Tuesday, which invariably ended up with fights, and Brewer wouldn't stop it because it was a fight. He'd let the fight happen, and then we'd go again, and then it could blow up somewhere else. So, but yes, there was not, like, it wasn't carried off the field. It was, we saw it as a necessary process to go through, for us to be able to hopefully beat a Munster or Toulouse if they come at us, and it just got better and it built from there. But train hard, play easy. We trained very hard and very physical with each other, and if fellas were tired on a Thursday from Tuesday, that was just part of the whole deal.
It's interesting, Bern, that you've mentioned a few times Mike Brewer there and his kind of influence in this. I think it is fascinating that some of the guys who've come from outside Ireland have been, I suppose, almost iconic in the rivalry. Probably more recently, James Lowe probably sums up the rivalry in a way, getting in people's faces. He has been open about hating the Munster guys when they've got a red jersey on. You think of Felipe Contepomi as well in 2005 when he's cupping his ears, celebrating. And then a year later, he's getting his head kicked in by the Munster pack at every single ruck. But it sounds like Brewer was, he understood what this rivalry meant and what beating Munster could mean for Leinster.
Yeah, he took it as a personal challenge to make us better. And like, in fairness, Brewer was actually technically unbelievably good, really good around the breakdown, good around the line out maul. I would say the best thing was just giving you an edge, and constantly onto you around your physicality, and like, he was there for you. He had your back, and in fairness, like, it sounds so obvious, but he had our back as a forward pack, you know what I mean? And he said to us, look, we deserve to get respect, but we gotta earn it. And like, he's had lots of jobs with Mike Brewer and as a head coach, and he's had a lot of issues with player management and things like that. But from my point of view, as a forwards coach, he was unbelievably influential for us at the time. Just made us better technically, but more importantly, made us better mentally, and in terms of having pride in ourselves and looking after each other. So, I mean, example would be that stuff where Munster went after Felipe, potentially without Brewer, we mightn't have reviewed that in the right way. We might have reviewed it around technical faults we made or tactical faults we made, whereas the reality was there was one of our own, getting beaten up and targeted, and that's all you need to know, and that's all you need to fix, really. And whether you're 1 inch or 2 inches lower doesn't really matter. If you're looking after your buddies, and and I think Felipe was well able to look after himself, etc. But it was important that as a pack, we didn't leave anyone alone.
I met Mike Brewer, I think 2016 down in New Zealand. He's working in that Iran's kind of coaching academy down there. And he was brilliant, brilliant interview, but like really blunt. And I can see what you mean about what he brought in that sense in good, and also with dealing with players. I think he had a few comments about Johnny Sexton's place kicking that Johnny didn't like, but that was Brewer's opinion on it, and he was very direct in communicating it.
Yeah, he actually ended up, he was playing for Blackrock at the start of his career, and he got called in to be the forwards coach for Ireland. I'm not sure who was the head coach for a period as a consultant. And I remember hearing a story where he was a very good player, obviously, but I think he hadn't have picked some of the Shannon players in a probables v possibles or whatever, or he was hard on him in a review. And the week after, he had to go and play in Thomond for Blackrock against Shannon, and they gave it to him left, right, and centre. You know what I mean? It's just funny the way at the start of professionalism, it was so amateur in some ways, where he was player coach for Blackrock, and next thing he was actually coaching Ireland and players he was playing against.
Funny when you mentioned there, Bernard, like to say that, and you mentioned it as well yourself, Murray, about, say, Contepomi just getting bullied in that game in 2006, and maybe there not being necessarily a reaction from teammates and friends that you would expect in that type of an environment, and you needed to go through that process of nearly having it out among yourselves of training, maybe before that sort of a instinctive reaction was built or before it became prevalent again in the team. And like, that's probably something we've seen with Munster over the last couple of years against Leinster, like a couple of skirmishes, if I'm not recalling this incorrectly, maybe one like flashpoint after a game in which somebody, do you know what, the names and faces even escape me, but somebody's kind of getting shoved and like nobody's is kind of coming to his aid. And we've spoken as well, maybe not quite on the pod, about in the past couple of years, Munster's body language not quite being there, where things aren't going their way, and the heads drop a little bit, and there's a lot of scowling and frowning, and that seems to have been reversed. Do you think, like, for example, everyone was talking about CJ Stander smiling in that Clermont game, and it was a kind of a curious quirk afterwards that people were so fascinated by it, but it was because he was, even in a situation in which Munster were 25 odd points down early, like he was enjoying himself. There was no panic, and they were able to fight their way back into the game. Do you feel as though maybe, Murray, that Munster have kind of turned a corner themselves a little bit? We'll find out obviously at the weekend whether they're good enough to beat Leinster, but just from that point of view of being able to respond to adversity a little bit, because there's every chance in this game that they are going to find themselves down, they are going to find themselves back into a corner and maybe even chasing a lead.
Definitely, there's a real sense of momentum and confidence about Munster on the back of that Clermont game. From what I understand, when this game was initially going to be played on St. Stephen's Day, they were going to put out the full strength team and go for it, and they were really confident about taking down Leinster at that stage. And you don't want to read too much into press conferences, but on Monday or Tuesday it was, Johan van Graan was up, and there was a buzz off him, a little bit of confidence. He even had a go back at Leinster, which is so out of character for him. He usually says nothing, but he had a little bite back about the criticism from Leo Cullen and Felipe Contepomi about their box-kicking tactics, and saying Leinster are doing a bit that themselves, which is brilliant. You want that kind of stuff, especially in a week like this, which already had plenty of excitement in it. But yeah, I do get that sense from Munster, and I do get a sense that this week they feel they're in a really good place to do it. They've made progress, as Bernard said, with little parts of their attack. The rest of their game is still in really good nick, and they probably feel in the Munster camp that Leinster haven't been outstanding recently. Obviously a weakened team against Connacht losing, more impressive against Ulster, but I do sense from Munster that there's an extra level in their own sense of self-belief. Like, it's understandable that maybe their body language has been off, because, as we say, they've been dominated in this fixture for so long. It's really hard to reverse that, but this feels like a really prime opportunity to do it. And even though it is a regular season game, it's not another semi-final. That's where it really counts with this Munster team, and that's where they'll be judged. The bounce you can get out of winning this fixture, finishing off this block, this disrupted block, and heading away for the Six Nations with the international players, the rest of the guys staying around, it'll give the whole thing a lift. And then come that semi-final clash or final clash, if we get it this season, definitely that body language will start to reverse as well. That side of it is massive, as Mike Brewer pointed out. All those kind of mental and mindset factors are as important as the rest of it. And I think it's a really good chance for Munster just to chip away at that really poor record.
Yeah, just to agree with Murray there, I think if you're Leinster and you're the dominant team in Ireland, you'll want to quash that newfound optimism. I think Leinster saw Ulster coming to the RDS 2 weeks ago on the back of 10 wins. And, to have them going back up the road to Belfast with no points and Leinster having 5 points just puts another doubt in their mind, and they have to go off and figure that out. And likewise, Munster do look like they're reborn, and the body language, the confidence they're going to get from that win in Claremont is massive. They've been on, really good form in the Pro 14. But Leinster will know, go to Thomond, do a job on them. It nearly sets them back further, and it makes Leinster's next game against them, whether it's final or final, easier. And that's what you have to do if you're the king of the castle at the moment. And just thinking back to some stuff from the Crusaders and Scotty Robertson talking around, how they use that teaming to build a legacy, and what do kings do? They reign, they conquer. So from a Leinster point of view, okay, they mightn't be in great form, but they're going to have a very strong team in paper, and go down there, quash that optimism by beating them and beating them convincingly. It's not just 4 points or 5 points an offer. It's the damage you do long term.
That's a key point as well, Murray, from Leinster's point of view, because listen, if you were talking to people involved with Leinster over the last couple of years, and if you mentioned games against Munster, like a lot of them saw Munster as nearly soft touches. For them, the edge of the rivalry had nearly gone because they had been so dominant in the game for so long. You had the stats even earlier yourself, and there's nothing that could refocus the mind. Not that Leinster nearly need a refocusing, but for this specific fixture, then the idea of Munster being these plucky upstarts that might actually have a chance of gaining parity with you, or have ambitions of overthrowing you as the kings, if you like, they will be looking to absolutely step on necks, not literally, hopefully, this weekend. And actually, as Bernard says, send Munster, back, send Munster into a spiral, probably. This is the chance for them to inflict real psychological damage, probably more so than even previous games, because Munster are feeling confident, and anyone can convince themselves they're the best in the world until somebody comes along and proves that they're not.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that, and it does feel like an important one in the rivalry, and whoever's going to take that dominant position. Plus, you have the fact that it's a Six Nations trial. There's no way of avoiding that, and players are trying to talk that element of it down. But as the week's gone on, they're kind of going, yeah, you're right. Like, listen, we're playing for places in the squad. Any of those last minute doubts that Andy Farrell might have in this game, and that's why it feels old school in a way as well. Like, the time was that Munster versus Leinster was a massive part of being selected for the Ireland squad, when you didn't have as many provincial games, when there weren't loads of Celtic League games that were as important. So it feels like the kind of old school probables versus possibles in many ways. There's guys in the back row vying for positions, in the back three as well. All over the pitch, really, there are people who are in contention for Ireland, either starting spots or in the wider squad. And I love the fact that we've ended up with this game so close to the squad naming. Probably Monday we're going to get the Ireland squad, and Andy Farrell will be watching with interest. Fingers crossed no one picks up any injuries and rules themselves out that way. But I think there's a real chance for guys to rule themselves in with excellent performances. And that just adds another layer to it. We've been missing that in recent years, haven't we? The Stephen's Day matches or the festive interpro between Munster and Leinster kind of has been really good for guys launching their career. You think of Dan Levy, Jordan Larmer's brilliant try that time down in Thomond Park. Ringrose, I can remember making a line break up the right hand side to set up a Nathewa try, I think it was, to kind of launch himself into the wider consciousness as well. So there's always been those moments, but as you've said at the start of the show, full strength, locked and loaded, with so much on the line, it just feels perfectly primed to springboard into the Six Nations. And I'm fascinated to see which guys put their hands up. For me, the back row is the really interesting one. Even picking the starting back rows is tricky enough for both of them, actually. But there's loads of contenders there, and it just adds another layer of intrigue, really.
Yeah, Bernard, let's bring you in on that then, the actual key battles in this game and where it might be won and lost. Back row is an interesting one. As Murray says there, even for the provinces individually, it's probably difficult to select a back row. So many names vying for positions, and those guys who do get selected in the starting lineups are probably vying for Ireland positions. You have kind of the likes of Rhys Ruddock, who we've mentioned before, should be in a situation in which he gets to kind of resurrect or build upon his international career to date. And yet he's up against a kind of rejuvenated Munster duo, if you like, in Stander and Peter O'Mahony. But maybe Stander didn't need rejuvenation. Peter O'Mahony definitely did, I think, based on past form, but has been absolutely flying it. So we've got a lot of guys coming into form at the right time for international selection, but they're meeting guys who are in a kind of a corresponding level of form in similar situations. And if we're talking about kings or dynasties being overthrown, it's a chance for the likes of Ruddock to get one up on O'Mahony. But on the flip side, similar to Leinster, O'Mahony is probably looking at the likes of Ruddock and thinking, you're not getting my jersey.
Yeah, no, Ruddock. Look, Peter O'Mahony and Stander are banging form, which is great. Doris is going to be absolutely huge for Ireland in the Six Nations. But I think there's a lot of interest in Ruddock because he's just been so consistent for Leinster. As he won 3 Players of the Month in a row, which is unheard of. Well, it's very competitive in Leinster to do that. So it's testament how good he's been. And I've had loads of people ask me and question me around, has he done something to piss off Farrell or whatever? And he wouldn't have. I mean, he's probably one of the most likeable, well-respected people in camp, and to such an extent that, under Joe, he sometimes captained Ireland, even when he wasn't, a first-choice player. So that's not the case at all. I just think he's had injuries. He's up in a very competitive area, but he seems to have found the best form of his career now, with a run of games. And he's the player I'm looking forward to seeing most at the weekend, and just seeing, can he just deliver again on a huge stage for him personally, with obviously an Irish squad being announced Monday. And look at, maybe he won't get a start for Ireland in the Six Nations, but I think certainly his form deserves to be back in the reckoning anyway. But that battle, will be massive.
It's impossible to call how something like that is going to go, Murray. We just have to wait and see and let the game play out. But where are the other areas in which you think this game will be decided? Like a couple more matchups maybe where whoever gets the upper hand will probably have the upper hand in the match itself. Like thinking of set piece, what kind of form are both provinces coming into it in terms of their line out, their maul and so on?
Yeah, both the mauls are in pretty good nick. They're both weapons with their attacking maul. I like the way Munster have added a bit of variety around the maul as well, with some of their line-out attack. Little dummy maul setups, peel around the back with the hooker. You've seen Kevin O'Byrne prominent in that role, or playing off a little bit wider. You remember that lovely strike play for Keith Earls' kind of half break against Connacht. They've definitely got a little bit more character around their set piece, let's say. Larkham's blueprint is a lot more prominent there. Even you think of Mike Haley's try in Clermont, beautiful set piece play. And they were really important, those set-piece attacks, in that comeback. There were several other examples where they nailed every little detail of it. And they threw something that Clermont probably weren't expecting at them. And I think Munster have done that better generally with their attack. I agree with Bernard. I don't think they're going to be flinging the ball around in this game. Weather conditions, per the forecast at the moment, are going to be pretty poor as well. So it's not ideal for that. But I still think they can bring a little bit more variety. Leinster want you to run straight at them. They love making double tackles, and they'll do it all day if they have to. They're really destructive in those tight channels if you're going to be confrontational. There has to be an element of that from Munster, of course, but you'd love to see a couple of examples of those tip-on passes they're increasingly using, the link passes out the back to whoever their playmaker is, and just throwing slightly different pictures at it. That applies to the kicking game as well. That was the big theme, as Bernard mentioned. Munster got a lot of criticism for kicking so often against Leinster, and my criticism probably was that there wasn't much else to the game plan apart from that. I totally understand it. Like kicking, it's curious. It's such a divisive thing in rugby now. It's such an important part of the game. It allows you to apply pressure, and you think of, say, early in that game, box kick up on Jordan Larmour, Munster follow up, CJ Sander wins a turnover penalty, 3-0 straight away. There's a really good example of using your kick game to pressure. At other times, you're relieving pressure, putting the opposition in a tough situation where they might kick back to you, and you'll have a really good kick return opportunity, or else one of those line-out platforms that are so important in the game. So there's loads of sense in doing it, but again, it's about a little bit of variety and not becoming predictable in that. I think there have been signs again from Munster of slightly mixing that up, kicking off 10 at times. Even the dummy box kick setups they've been using kind of intermittently. You'd love to see Dialende offering a bit in that regard, as well as the wings with their little chip kicks and grubbers. You just have to have more than your 9 kicking everything. That'll be a big part of it, of course, especially with those conditions. But I'd love to see Munster slightly mix things up, and I think how they go about breaking down Leinster will be really interesting, as well as how they defend Leinster. It's such a big challenge, isn't it? Most teams get it wrong. Leinster tend to dominate possession. Was looking at the stats before we came on. They're up over 18 minutes, 18:31 on average time in possession. Munster 15:42. Leinster being the highest in the Pro 14, and they love grinding you down and milking penalties out of you, getting into good positions on the pitch and being really clinical. They have the ability, obviously, to play many different ways. But I've been interested to see Connacht, obviously, most prominently picking them off for a couple of intercept tries. Even in the A match the last day, Ulster A picked them off 2 or 3 times, I think, in the first half. So you're seeing teams who are aggressive against Leinster's attack being rewarded, really. Most prominently, obviously, Saracens being the best example of all, shutting them down, stifling them, and just being ultra aggressive. So I'd probably expect something similar from that regard with Munster. So it is fascinating to see how they approach it, and I think they have more weapons to really challenge Leinster, and that's why I'm finding it so hard, in particular, to call this game more so than ever. I think Munster have made progress in the areas they needed to.
Yeah, it's an interesting point about the kicking game. I know a lot of Munster fans and even people like Tom Savage, Three Red Kings, who does a lot of analysis on Munster, probably feel in the aftermath of that game that a lot of fans were too harsh on the amount of times or the number of times Munster kicked, and really that the issue was not the tactics that Van Graan deployed, but more so how they were executed. I would add, like, my own personal feelings on it would be similar to yourself or yours, Murray, in that to me the problem was that they didn't deviate from it at all. Like, it was their sole plan and it wasn't going well, and there was sort of no adaptation. And sometimes you have to cut your losses a little bit and just try something else. Particularly, I think the criticism of it was particularly accentuated by the fact that they had tried other things in the previous game against Leinster only a week or so prior, and it had looked more successful, albeit in a completely different type of game. But if they are to kick again, Bernard, this weekend, as they probably will, quite a lot from 9, I don't think it should be perceived as being a backward step by Munster fans and by other fans, because, as you said at the start of the show, there are a number of ways to win a game, and like, if you try to go mano a mano against Leinster out wide, like, and try to play expansively or as expansively as they can and match them out there, you're going to come up short. They're actually a better team than Munster. Like, it's kind of the elephant in the room. They are still a better team than Munster. Even if Munster win this weekend, it doesn't mean they're a better team than Leinster. So from Munster's point of view, they have to be meticulous and careful in planning out a victory, like plotting it out. They're not just going to freestyle it. So what I'm saying in a very long-winded way is, if they go back to that type of tactic that they used in the semi-final last season, it doesn't mean it's wrong, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it was right, and I stood up for Johan afterwards, and I thought the way Leo criticised them probably told a story around what Leinster fear, or what Leinster don't like playing against is that type of game plan, and teams who stick rigidly to it, because Leinster wait for you to overplay, and then they expose you, then they get a couple of scores ahead of you, and then it's curtains, because I find it hard to predict a team who let Leinster get a big lead and catch up and pass them out late. I think you have to be the opposite. You have to get ahead of them, and like Saracens did, like Connacht did, and make them chase the game. And that's probably I'd say what Stuart and Leo want to get better at is the day they do go behind, is that how they can actually go behind properly. I know they were behind at half-time against Ulster, but like to go 2 scores behind, how they manage that. And because they're going to have to get better at that, obviously, to go and win Europe or potentially win another Pro 14. But from a Munster point of view, I think has to be a strong focus on their kicking game. They just need to improve their ability to get the ball back on some of those kicks. So I think they had 25 kicks against Leinster in the semi-final, but their ability to get the ball back, or even not just not get it back in the air, but put pressure on that breakdown, like England do, where they just flood that breakdown, make it a mess, take you out of your sync. The problem was Leinster were catching it comfortably, able to get momentum on the next carry, and then kick back onto Munster and put pressure onto them. So I think it's going to have to be a key target. The reality as well is in a semi-final is that, unfortunately, JJ had a 33% goal kicking percentage in that game. So Munster were in the right areas of the field. They did win penalties, but they weren't able to convert them into points. And I do agree that the last 20 minutes, when they were 2 scores behind, they needed to have a plan B, and they didn't have it. But I'm sure they have now. I can't see how they didn't use that game as a learning point for them. And they have evolved their game further now, and Delande is more comfortable now, and they have more players in form. So I would be shocked if they didn't have a plan B this weekend. But from a mentality point of view, they need to commit 100% to plan A, and try and affect that really well, because that was the issue. They didn't affect what was a simple plan well against Leinster, and they looked to have real lack of belief in that plan. And that's probably why we were all shocked, because it was a tepid kind of vanilla type performance really from them, which will have, they're not going to beat Leinster playing like that. You know what I mean? They have to have a good plan. They have to bring physicality, intensity, unsettle Leinster, get in their faces, if it's going to work. And yeah, I'd be shocked if they don't show massive improvements, because they've done all the stuff since then to change. And I think defensively they're in a really good place at the moment. And I think they're starting to throw some shooters in. They're sending the ball carrier back inside, and they've got some really good jackal threats. And the way their game has been refereed at the moment, I mean, you don't really want to have the ball in the wrong areas of the field, and that's why teams are kicking so much, because they just want to get the opposition to start to overplay, and then obviously look to get some penalties at the breakdown or turnovers if you have jackal threats. Which, I mean, with one example, but Ty Byrne against Connacht was phenomenal. He always is very good, but I mean, he was untouchable at the breakdown, and particularly, but also it wasn't just him. It was the way Munster were making 2-man hits and actually sending the ball carrier back in towards Tig with a dominant 2-man hit, and then committing the third man. So it's not just Tig's on the field. There's a lot of joined up thinking in how they're executing it. And as I said, it mightn't just be Tig. There's other players in there who are capable of doing it. But JJ, if he starts, he needs to. I'd be shocked if Munster won the game and he's not 90%.
One of the other areas that didn't go well the last day for Munster was the line out.
4 line-outs,
4 line-outs, didn't they?
4 line-outs in key areas, yeah.
Probably off the back of good kicking many of the times where they got good field position, then they're in position to strike and they just don't get the launch off the set piece. It's a really simple kind of thing, but in fairness, their line-out is usually very reliable. Leinster have had a couple of wobbles, obviously, in that area, and you'd imagine that O'Mahony and Byrne will be licking their lips at a chance to attack that area where maybe there's a lack of confidence from Leinster. So that was one thing that could have made a big difference the last day. And it was still a very tight game. Munster probably should have had a penalty try at the end for that Mull collapse. That would have brought it obviously even closer on the scoreline. Leinster didn't blow them away there, but they had the more subtle, clever touches in the game. You think of the build-up to their try, it was involved that lovely play from the right-hand side scrum in their own half. They go all the way to the left edge, then they kick behind Earls and he knocks on in his own 22. And that was really the key moment of the game. There was that little bit of variety. Beyond that, Leinster didn't actually have to do a lot. So you'd love to see Munster nail that line-out platform and show us what they've been working on.
Yeah, and I think statistically, if you're looking at stats going into this game, Munster's line-out is number 1 in the competition. And I agree with you, Murray. I love how they launch off their line-out now and that balance between mauling and intricate plays off it. And Leinster's line-out has dropped, I think, to 87% or 88%. So they are struggling a little bit. And Munster have a very good defensive line-out. So if you do obviously find grass and get into touch, and like Carty did in the second half when they had a lead, they would fancy themselves to be able to get some turnovers, or at least disrupt the quality of ball that Gibson Parker, Luke McGrath gets. So, like, there's logic behind that plan as well, to give Leinster lots of line-out throws, or force them to kick out, so you've got a line-out opportunity in their half. And statistically at the moment, Munster scrum is is a little bit up and down, but their line-out is exceptionally good.
A lot of this conversation feels centred on Munster, and it's really only because the onus is on them in every area to improve. Like, when another team has been dominant for so long, it's difficult to talk about what they need to do to be better when they've already been better for so long. But I'm going to ask that question anyway, Birch. Like, are there areas that you would like to see Leinster improve upon, even from that Ulster game, even going back to Sarries? Like, do you feel as though they've adapted enough or added enough nuance or variety to their game this season so far that would lead you to believe that if we get the latter stages of European competition, and adding the caveat that Sarries aren't even there, like, that they can go one step further this time? Like, have you seen enough in Leinster to suggest that they're evolving their game as well, and that they, even if Munster do make some of the improvements we're talking about this weekend, that maybe Leinster might be one step ahead again, having moved on that little bit more?
I can't say for sure I've seen it, because I don't think they've been tested, and that's the problem for them. And that's, like, even against Ulster, which should have been a really good test for them. They got away with at halftime 9-5 down, having not really played well at all, being really rusty, and then they just crank up the pressure a little bit the third quarter, and suddenly the game is over. Like, it's and in fairness, that's testament to their ability to be able to lift and execute and put pressure. But unfortunately, Ulster didn't give them the tests in terms of real quality, or having really good discipline and not making many errors. Like, Ulster basically folded and gave the game to Leinster, whereas the reality is, to say for sure that they could beat a Toulouse, they could beat a Racing, they probably need to play them a little bit more. And that's and I think Munster, to be honest, I think Munster are more of a genuine threat. Like, Ulster are doing great. They don't have a huge amount of internationals who are going to be starting for Ireland. Munster have a little bit more about them, I think, at the moment. And I think this game could be the game where we can say, oh yeah, Leinster have moved on and learned. But unfortunately for them, it's they're in second gear nearly all the time in a lot of games. And then, like, if you look at Montpellier, they're 13 to the top 14, didn't, I would say, try a yard really in that game in Europe. And Northampton are in shocking form. So even Europe hasn't given Leinster two games where they could go, yeah, we've been tested, we've been pushed, and we've had to evolve. And look, I'm sure they are working on stuff, but unfortunately for them, they got Saracens in a quarter final, and just bang, scrum weakness exposed, and they don't get tested in those areas enough. But I genuinely do think that this week will be a real test for them, and we'll see how comfortable they are against another team who are top six in Europe.
Yeah, we're excited to see what Munster can produce as they try to gain parity with Leinster, but equally enthused by the prospect of Leinster bringing some surprises and showing us a few things we haven't seen so far this season. I'll get your predictions, so gents, before we talk about Ireland briefly and then wrap. Bernard, we'll start with yourself. Munster or Leinster for you?
Yeah, I think Leinster just about. I mean, I agree with you. We haven't spoken about Leinster, and I was doing a piece of footage for pre-match for Premier, and I went to look into Leinster lineouts, because obviously statistically it's not great, and I thought, I could do a minute and a half of analysis of Leinster's lineout and why Munster can attack that. But the reality was, okay, the percentages are dropped down, but it's not like brutal. It's not something you'd say, we can definitely go after them. They're crap. It's just they've missed a few lineouts at key moments in games they were comfortable. So I ended up doing a bits on how good their attack is, because I think it's really balanced, and obviously they're hitting 9 of the top 20 metrics, and most of those are attack wise. So I think Leinster just about, but I think Munster have the potential to win. It doesn't matter if Leinster are topping all this. I mean, it's about this 80 minutes, and this Munster team, just making sure they get the better of those metrics over 80 minutes, not over the course of the season.
Murray, your thoughts?
Munster 18, Leinster 16. What about you, Gav? That's what people really want to hear.
I think Munster 13, Leinster 26.
That's a big blow to the Munster fans.
Yeah, I know, including myself.
Just when Gav was reflecting there, I had my old boss in Grenoble, Fabrice Landreau. So he'd pick a team like basically without any logic. Okay, and sometimes I'd ask him, "Why did you go for that scrum half?" Like he's been on the S-boards for the last 4 months in the freezer, and he just go basically. He just has a feeling, and there's no logic. You know what I mean? So I sometimes wonder, Gav, are you half French in terms of your prediction?
Well, personally, I'm insulted, not by the suggestions that I'm half French, but by the accusation that there's no method to my mad predictions. The reason why I predict that score is because I think Leinster, I said it during the show, I just think Leinster are a better team in most areas of the pitch, despite the fact that Munster are improving. I don't quite see this as being their 2008 game that you played in Birch in Munster. I think it'll be... it might be another season before we see that, and another season again before we see Munster actually rejoin the European elite. So, I think it'll be a close game. I think Munster will be incredibly competitive. I think it'll be a lot better than that Pro 14 semi-final, and the margin might be a little bit misleading as well. That's a kind of a margin taking into account maybe a late Leinster score to pull away, similar to a couple of those Champions Cup or Heineken Cup semi-finals as they were back then. Ireland, lads, let's chat about it. I'm just going to get your squads, because we are actually running out of time. We've had a couple of connectivity issues throughout the podcast, which have been smoothly edited out, I think, at this point, but it's cost us a few minutes. Mainly my fault. I'll start with yourself, Murray. We're just going to kind of go through your projected squad and Birch's as well, who you see making the matchday 23 for opening fixture. And I enjoy doing these. Usually we do them in a kind of a longer term sense, like picking the Lions squad about 7 years out from the tour. But this time, listeners will have an opportunity to come back and tell you how wrong you were. So go for it.
Yeah, there's nothing too controversial. Healy, Herring, Porter, I think in the front row. I've been impressed with Herring's form. I don't think anyone else has done enough to take that jersey from him. And for me, those two props are clearly first choice. The second row, first choice for me is Henderson Ryan if Henderson gets fit. But otherwise, Ty Burns' form has been absolutely brilliant. And I think the back row they finished up with against Scotland, Stander, O'Mahony in the 7 jersey, and Doris at number 8. I think he has to play there. He's the best number 8 in the country in my eyes. I think that's the way it goes in the back row. So I wonder, is Birch's pack very similar, or has he gone for something different there?
Yeah, my pack is similar. It's same. It's actually Keane, Healy, Herring, Porter, Ryan, Henderson. Interestingly, I listened to a podcast with Henderson yesterday. Niall Annette, he's the Worcester hooker, and he said, Paul, he's been on to him 2 or 3 times already, planning, talking about line-outs, which is great to hear, so if Henderson was fit, I'd go with him, and then the same back row. I just thought that experiment and balance of O'Mahony at 7 with getting Doris into the team with Stander worked really well, so I wouldn't see any changes there.
Do you pick a pack, Gav?
I didn't, Murray. I'm not going to lie to you. I saw your message too late, and I was working on something else. So much in the same sense as I didn't get a chance to shave, I didn't get a chance to pick a pack. I'm delighted to defer to you lads, to be honest. I do love the idea. Imagine if you weren't really passionate about lineouts, getting those phone calls from Paulie, how annoying that would be. For Christ's sake, not again. Let's take it on.
It's going to be obsessive.
And you know what? Ian comes across as a very laid back guy, and it'll just be really interesting how Paul manages people who have different outlooks or different personalities about lineouts that he does.
100%. You can take it on with the backs here, so Birch. My lag is getting so bad. It's time to wrap. But take us on with your back 7.
Yeah.
Ansel.
Yeah. The tried and trusted Murray Sexton, Henshaw Ringrose in the centre, and Earls on one wing. Hugo Keenan at Stockdale to wrap it up.
Sorry, Murray, but is that Keenan at 15 and Stockdale on the
Stockdale
wing,
left wing,
or is it
Stockdale left wing?
Stockdale left
Yeah,
wing?
I'm going back. I'm putting Stockdale back in the wing. Yeah.
Murph?
Yeah, Murray, Sexton, same centres. Aki hasn't played obviously last while, and I think Henshaw's been really, really good, and he's got better as the season's gone on. Went for Stockton on the left, Keenan fullback. I went for Larmour on the right wing with Earls on the bench this time. He's had a couple of poorer games, which is really weird to say about Keith Earls, just in the last while, including that Clermont game where, in fairness, he recovered from a poor start. But Larmour looked sharp when he came back. He obviously hasn't got a lot of rugby under his belt, but I'd love to see his footwork back in the team and offering something different in that sense. Earl's a really good option there as 23 and covers everything. So, yeah, I think there's a nice choice to make in the back three there. Obviously, Stockdale's gone at 15, but I think Keenan is playing brilliant rugby. He's so solid and secure, as well as having the ability to beat defenders. He's stepping up as a first receiver and just keeps getting better and better. So that's the way I went with it.
Is it a concern at all that, like, we've probably done 15 podcasts over the last 12 to 18 months talking about prospective Ireland squads and guys coming up, future stars, and really only 2 of them are actually in both of your match day 15s, I guess, for this opener, Six Nations opener. Like Doris, Keenan are kind of like newish faces, obviously, but for all of the talk about like the rise of John Cooney, and for all of the guys that were putting their hands up sort of post-World Cup when we were talking about transitioning and really blooding new players, we still have vaguely the same squad as the one that did well in 2018 and has not been so good since then. And throw that to yourself, Bert.
Yeah, it is. It is a bit of a worry, I suppose, in some ways, but also it's testament to the fact that, well, particularly the guys that you would have said, you know, had more longevity. There's Murray, Sextons, you know, Healy's, Peter Manny, Stander have shown glimpses and shown better form and is tried and trusted. So it's up to the others to really nail down their place. And even a guy that we're talking around as deserving an opportunity is Rhys Ruddock, who we've known about for 10 years. So, but that's the way it is. That these young players, you know, the Coombs, etc., have done really well, but they have to just keep progressing. They have to prove it over 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and on the biggest stage. And everything they've done so far has been great, but they just need to take it to another level. And it's these big games is where the opportunities are to really put your hand up. So in some ways, yeah, it's disappointing we haven't seen more, but in other ways, it's credit to the players who are there that they're managing to warrant their selection, because there's no bias in this. We put forward whoever we thought would do the best job, and I think, you know, myself and Murray had very similar teams, and it's because, you know, we still feel they're the best players in the country.
Yeah, Jesus, I don't mean it as a criticism of your selections, like more so wondering, is it maybe an indictment on the guys coming up, the up and comers, and Murray, like, even for yourself. So, like, if we were to look at prospective new caps, if I could ask you if there was 1 or 2 players that you would anticipate maybe factoring in this international squad of the Six Nations, maybe making a debut at some point, not necessarily against Wales, are there a couple of guys that you would expect to see kind of blooded, or will it be more or less tried and tested, do you think, throughout the competition?
I'd say that Italy match is generally the one where you maybe get a cap or 2 in there, and I would anticipate that would be something similar. I mean, the guys who've been around it now a little bit over the last year, you think of Harry Byrne. He's been in several camps at this stage. They clearly want him to, I suppose, fast track. Craig Casey as well has been in there and is a really good talent. Unfortunately, he's sitting behind Conor Murray in terms of Munster first choice, so he's got a battle there. But I look at those 2 guys. Coombs, I think, is one who has been really impressive consistently. And the fact that he's such a big man helps a lot. You know, Test rugby, you've got to be powerful and strong. It's not a place to just throw kids in. But he looks like he can already be a kind of, I suppose, physical enforcer in many ways. And he's stood up to a few good tests so far, and there are many more ahead of him. So I suppose they're the 3 I'm thinking of off top of my head. But I do think there are guys who've challenged the status quo. Like you mentioned, John Cooney, his form has been really good. I kind of have him penciled in on my bench. Jack Carty, similar. He's been good and shows something different. You would imagine Kilcoyne will be back in there as well, presuming he gets true fit. And Ronan Keller will still be in the mix. So there's guys pushing, but as Bernard says, it's tough to get past guys who've proven themselves over a long time. I know people will argue that there's loads of guys in the Ireland team who haven't been playing well, but I think a lot of that tends to be exaggerated. And certainly recently, the team we've listed out there, like the vast majority of those guys are in good form and have had good performances in the bigger games that we've had. Obviously, there's been postponements and cancellations to factor in there, but most of those guys are playing pretty well. And I think Andy Farrell will actually be pretty excited about the kind of form and fitness that he's getting his squad in for this Six Nations.
Super stuff, gents. Thanks a million as always. Thank you, Birch. Thank you, Murray. And
cheers.
Thank you to everybody at home as well. You can join the good folks in the members rugby WhatsApp group by joining 42 at members.the42.e. You also get access then to a plethora of extra podcasts and off the book sort of content that wouldn't be on the homepage necessarily when you fire up the 42 on the desktop. If you enjoy this podcast, we'd really appreciate if you could leave a rating and review. Hate asking for them, but absolutely love when you give them to us. And people tend to be incredibly kind with them. If you have a couple of minutes to spare during the week at all, or even after you listen to this podcast on your 5K walk or jog, take a breather. Give us a rating or review. It helps us out an awful lot. Thanks a million to those of you who have taken the time to do so. Listen, the big one over the weekend, enjoy it. And to Connacht fans, I apologise for not mentioning the Ospreys match until right now. But, you know, Munster-Leinster is kind of the marquee fixture of the weekend. I think everybody will have an eye on it. Enjoy all of the rugby over the weekend. Back on Monday with Murray and Owen Toolan for members, and back on Thursday ourselves for this regular stuff. Until then, mind yourselves. Take it easy.